of Parliament and in Liverpool, and I also am what's called the Shadow Education Secretary, which means I speak in Parliament about education for the Labour Party. And this is Polly, who's a friend of mine, but more important, she's going to be standing at the next general election in 3 years' time in Thurrock as the Labour candidate to be the Member of Parliament for Thurrock. Yes. And Oliver, who is one of the councillors from Thurrock, and he's in charge, he's the one you really need to ask the difficult questions to, because he's in charge of education for the local area. So who wants to ask their first question?
Well, I hope you've enjoyed walking around school.
Thank you. Yes, we have. That's why we're late. It's been such an enjoyable day.
I would like to ask the first question.
What impression do you have of our school?
Very good impression. I'd heard excellent things already, because when I spend a lot of my time visiting schools, so I normally go to 3 or 4 schools every week in different parts of England, and so I normally read a bit, so I can see the results have got much better. You've got a really good Ofsted report, there's money being spent on improving the buildings, so there's always a sense that it's going to be a good school. But I've been very, very impressed. There's lots of really exciting things, both about what's happening now, but also the plans for the future with the studio school as well. So it looks like this school's on the up after a really good period of getting better.
Have you always wanted to be an MP?
Not always, no. I think often I'm asked what I wanted to be when I was at the same age as the group that I'm meeting. And I think when I was at secondary school, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a barrister. I think I used to watch courtroom dramas. I like the wigs, so I sort of fancied the idea of being a barrister. And then I actually joined the Labour Party when I was 15. But not really. I didn't think, well, I'll join the Labour Party because I want to be an MP. It was more that things were going on around the area that I lived in or in the country that I didn't agree with. And so I wanted to be part of a political party for that reason. And it was only much later, really, when I was into my 20s, that I thought, oh, maybe I'd actually stand and become a Member of Parliament.
Do you fancy being an MP?
Not really.
Do any of you? Are any of you interested? Maybe? No. Maybe one day? How come you're in charge? Are you?
Volunteered.
Very good.
Yeah, he'll be an MP.
George, would you like to ask one?
Did something happen during your school period that drove you to want to make schools better?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, when I mentioned that I joined the Labour Party when I was 15, this was in 1982. So without going too political, it was when Margaret Thatcher had just become the Prime Minister. And one of the things that was happening was the amount of money being spent on schools was being cut back a lot. And I think that probably did affect me, because I thought this isn't right, because if we're going to spend money, surely the most important thing you can spend taxpayers' money on is making sure there's a really, really good education. So that's probably what then meant when I did get into politics. I've always taken a big interest in education. Also, I went from a comprehensive school to Oxford University, and it's still the case that at Oxford and Cambridge and some of the other universities, about half the places go to kids from private schools. And I've always felt very passionate that I want those young people for whom university is the way forward, and I know that's not for everyone, to feel that they can aim as high as they want, because it isn't that people who go to private schools are cleverer than people who go to state schools. They just get given more opportunities, and I just want everyone to get those opportunities that are right for them.
Kelsey?
What GCSE results did you get, and how did they affect you once you had left school?
Well, I'm so old that we didn't do GCSEs when I was at school. We still did something called O-levels. I don't know if you've ever heard of O-levels, but they were got rid of, I think, about 20 years. But I'm 45 now, so it was 30 years ago that I was doing my O-levels. I'm trying to remember what I got. I think I did 8, and I think I got 7 A's and a B. And I'm trying to remember what subjects I did. It was before the national curriculum, so you actually had a lot more choices. There weren't so many things you absolutely had to do in those days. You had to do English and maths, and I think pretty much everything else was optional. And it was, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was different. Everything was done on exams.
To improve education?
Well, that's a really good question, because my answer to that may sound like a little bit of a cop-out, but it's genuinely what I think, which is, when I come to visit schools, that's where I get the ideas from about how to improve education. Because I think too often politicians think that we know better than the people who are working in schools, and I think we need to change that. Because every time I come to a school, I see something fantastic and think, actually, isn't that something that we could get all of the schools to be doing? So I'm in favour of schools having more of an ability to decide for themselves what they're going to do, provided the schools are preparing you as young people for the world after school, so going to work, going on to college, apprenticeships, all of the other different options. I do think it's partly about money, so I worry when money gets cut back. One of the things the government's done that worries me a lot is getting rid of the education maintenance allowance, which may have affected some of you, obviously not directly, but in the future, which was about encouraging young people from lower income families to stay in education. I worry a lot about that, and of course I worry about tuition fees going up to so high for those who do want to go on to higher education, though I would still say if it's right for you, do it. You know, even with that high level of fee, there are lots of personal as well as financial benefits that come from having a degree, if that's the right option for you.
Important, but I also think there's one of the things that the studio school is going to give the next generation of people coming to this school is an opportunity to earn money at work. And that's something that if I look back at when I was a little bit older than you, one of the most important things I did was get a Saturday job, because I had to get up on a Saturday, make sure my hair was brushed, get out there, and even if it was really quite boring, I had to go there and do some work. And I came home and I had some money which I owned, nobody else did, and I could actually say that's money that I'm going to spend my way. And even though I had lots of homework and I was at school 5 days a week, that Saturday job meant that I knew what work was like, so that when I had to get a proper job, I'd already got quite a lot of those skills. So however much everyone goes on about your homework, which is really important, I'm not undermining that whatsoever, but I would say if you've got an opportunity to be able to do something like that, as soon as you can, I would do that, because that definitely gives you an idea, particularly because a lot of Saturday jobs are things like retail, and it means you learn how to be nice to people and polite to people, even when they're being quite annoying, which is a quite an important thing to learn, basically, for your whole life. And that fantastic thing when you can take that money home and say, that's mine. I've got a building that you can be proud of, and a variety of opportunities. I mean, literally, we had history, French, English, maths, and I was, it was really out there to do drama. Look at you doing resistant materials and all these amazing things. The opportunities to find something which is absolutely right on your talent is more now than it has been before. And I think there are lots of things that are much harder about being a young person now than when we were young. But those opportunities and the support that you get from a wide variety of adults in your learning environment, beyond the teachers, saying, yes, you can do this, that is fantastic, and I really think you should make the most of it. I know you're always getting grown-ups telling you to make the most of it, but seriously, it's really important, and the resources that we've committed to young people is really important, because we know that will make the difference, not just for you, but for the country. And that's why people put the effort in for you. And I think there are things that are really hard now, but there are things that are just, there is a lot more variety, and that gives many more young people many more opportunities to be the best they possibly can be.
Thank you for having your time.
No, thank you all of you, and very best of luck for the future. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Before you go, could I ask one more question? Because
course.
one of the other children that were in the other group wanted to ask you, and I thought it was quite interesting, so I said that I would. At school, if they have a disagreement with somebody, they'd be expected to sit down and talk to each other nicely.
I know what you were saying.
And her question was, why don't the people in the House of Commons speak to each other nicely?
I know. Does anyone ever watch it? Have you ever seen Prime Minister's Questions, which is probably the only bit that people sometimes see? And I've taken school parties around Parliament, and we've gone into the chamber, which is the bit where we have the meetings, and a lot of children and young people have said to me, oh, this is where you all stand up and shout at each other. And I think that's the impression that's given, and I don't think it is I think it's a very good question. I don't think it does give a good impression, and the answer, I suppose, which is a pathetic answer, is it's always been like that, but that's no reason not to change something. And I think we want to get into a more civilised way of debating, rather than it all being often very petty, sometimes quite personal, and not something that relates to people's everyday lives. And often people in politics say, well, why aren't the public more interested in what we do? If the main thing you see on television is us all shouting at each other at Prime Minister's Questions, it's no wonder that people don't see politics as relevant.